this as we move into this. But my name is John Wiley. I'm a professor in real estate here at GSU. And, we have a few panelists here that have agreed to talk to us about their careers. And so we have Audrey Reese, who is currently a partner at TriStar. And if I get these things wrong, just please correct me. I don't have that. I'm not that worried about being wrong. But previously, Audrey worked with Leadership Atlanta, CBRE, Morgan Stanley, and Lend Lease. We also have Devin Williams, who is a global portfolio manager for Brookfield Asset Management. And previously, she also worked at Morgan Stanley on the investment management side, and I think also at Lend Lease. We have Colin Connolly, who is the CEO and president of Cousins, which is a REIT headquartered here in Atlanta. And we have, and I think previously he also worked at Morgan Stanley. We have Dexter Warrior, who is principal and CEO of T. Smith and Company, which is a commercial brokerage firm that mainly focuses on tenant representation based here in Atlanta. And guess we're previously at Morgan Stanley and Lend Lease and Equitable. So, what's interesting, how their paths have crossed. I think 3 of the 4, Devin, Audrey, and Dexter, are all GSU alums. I'm not sure if Colin is or not, but so maybe we'll get started and just kind of like for the uninitiated, just maybe a little bit. Maybe not everybody here is familiar with what the different firms do. So maybe I'll start with you, Devin, if you want to tell us a little bit about what does Brookfield do?
Sure. Brookfield is a global asset manager with over $650 billion in assets across every sector imaginable, from renewable energy to logistics, which is what I do. And focusing on the logistics team, we have a portfolio that is about $12 billion globally, with a heavy focus, about half of that being in the US, and then the rest being scattered throughout Asia, Europe, South America, Australia, and soon in the Middle East as well.
Excellent. And then Audrey, you want to tell us about TriStar?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you guys. It's been a while, except for Dexter, whom I saw a few months ago. But TriStar is a real estate investment firm. It's on the smaller side, boutique real estate investment firm that works with high net worth individuals on the commercial side, where we invest in retail and office properties. We also are very involved in mission-based affordable housing. So we have a social impact fund that seeks to renovate blighted apartment communities while maintaining their affordability. So we're making a lot of strides in the affordable housing area, and that is a really big focus of our firm right now. In addition to doing asset management work at TriStar, I also run 2 somewhat related nonprofits. One is Star C, which provides wraparound services to affordable housing communities. And one is called Edu Housing, which is a combination of education and housing, which was designed to allow philanthropists and foundations and other individuals who want to invest in the preservation of affordable housing to do so.
Keep muting myself on accident. Third, Colin, you want to talk to us about Cousins Properties and what you guys are up to?
Sure. Cousins Properties, we're a publicly traded real estate investment company headquartered here in Atlanta. We've been around the city for quite a while. We were started by our founder, Tom Cousins, in 1958. So kind of 60 plus year history. And today we're roughly an $8 billion company that primarily focuses on trophy urban office properties. Atlanta is, as I said, is our hometown and our largest market. We own about, 7 million feet or so. Here in the city, about 20 million square feet across the Sun Belt, with large platforms and operations in Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Tampa, Florida, Charlotte, and Phoenix, Arizona, and Nashville. So heavy emphasis across the Sun Belt. We are an owner, operator, and also a very active developer across all of those cities.
Great, thanks, Colin. And then finally, Dexter, who is the genesis for this whole event. Dexter said, like I'm doing this stuff with the Atlanta Commercial Board of Realtors, and we got to get more information out to your students about careers in real estate and career paths. And Dexter was very helpful in reaching out to these panelists and putting this whole thing together. So thank you, Dexter. You want to tell us about T. Dallas Smith and Company?
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. And thank you, Devin and Audrey and Colin, for agreeing to be with us today to have a discussion about the real estate industry. So T. Dallas Smith and Company, we are exclusively representing occupiers of space, focusing on the office sector, industrial sector, as well as land acquisition work. So we represent large corporate Fortune 500 companies, along with a lot of local companies in Atlanta. So our goal really is to help build the next generation of real estate leaders. Glad to see Mazay McQueen on the line. Mazay recently graduated from Georgia State in 2020. So he's one of our newer colleagues that's joined our team, doing a phenomenal job. But we're trying to really inspire younger talent, younger people like Mazay to consider getting into commercial real estate. He started his senior year really just doing some internship with us. And he was very intrigued by it. I said, look, I'm gonna go and get my license and make a run of this on a full-time basis. So doing a great job for us. But again, we focus on representing occupiers of space. Our goal is to find clients to occupy Colin's buildings and hopefully find some along the way to occupy some of Devin's buildings as well. But that's more in the future. So we'll see what happens. But glad to be here, John. And thank you for moderating the panel discussion today.
Yeah, great. So as you can see, if you're listening, these are, at varying points in their careers and in different trajectories, although they common thread between them in some ways, with Morgan Stanley at least. And so, I guess my question is, some inflection point in your career that maybe took you away from, where you had started, and you turned and you ended up, it was like a decision that you made, or a change in the economy, or something like that. And so maybe I'll start with you, Audrey.
Okay, I'd say I've had several inflection points in my career. I actually started out in accounting. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting. I became a CPA, and I worked in public accounting for a while, but I had always had an interest in real estate. And that's how I came to Lend-Lease, which later became Morgan Stanley. I started off there doing accounting for real estate portfolios, even some portfolios that Dexter had. And over my tenure there, which was almost 12 years, I ended up going into asset management and then into portfolio management, where again, I was working very closely with Dexter as an asset manager, and then helping him a lot with the portfolio. After a while, I had decided to leave Morgan Stanley after my daughter was about a year old. I stayed home with her for just a short period of time. It wasn't really for me. So I just started doing some consulting work, working at CB. I worked part-time at Leadership Atlanta, again, relating to Dexter because he was the board chair at that point. And I think even in grad school, he had me do some real estate project for Leadership Atlanta. But so I did that for a while, working at Leadership Atlanta. It was very different. It was a nonprofit, not anything that I had done before. And I wasn't really expecting to work for them on a more than a temporary basis when I first got started, but that's how things evolve. And it was a very valuable time. I learned a lot, met some phenomenal leaders across Atlanta. But eventually I wanted to come back to my true love of real estate. And so I shifted again. And so now I'm back in real estate. And what I do now is really comprehensive of everything that I've worked on before. I'm still doing real estate, but also running some nonprofits. Doing some financial reporting, no accounting, but doing the investor reports, investor relations, different things like that. So I've kind of turned over time, but still, and been willing to try different things, but still sticking to the important aspects of real estate, some things dealing with business and finance, and really, I would say the relationships, because that's kind of what led me really to a lot of those changes is the relationships I had with people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a couple of themes that I hear there. One is kind of making a family decision and prioritizing, your time with your daughter and making some career choices that optimize your life and your well-being more so.
Right.
And then another thing I hear there is relationships. Is for example, your relationship with Dexter on moving to another opportunity. And it's, I mean, we're just looking at the definition of it's a small world after all, and especially in real estate.
Yes.
For a view here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to that point, I'll say that my two business partners here at TriStar, they're alumni of Leadership Atlanta. So I kind of really started having conversations with them when I had decided I wanted to come back into real estate, and everything worked out from there.
Thanks, Audrey.
Yeah.
Maybe next I'll go to Colin. Do you want to talk about some of your, you know, inflection points where you said, you know, I definitely want to do this and turn this way or that way?
Gosh, I've got a lot of different inflection points, but I guess I would characterize kind of one big decision that I made back when I was coming out of graduate school. Again, focused on the real estate business. I enjoyed the tangible nature of real estate and the relationships in the business, and a lot of kind of great entrepreneurial but friendly folks. And you know, for me, my decision, I grew up in Atlanta. I was at school outside of the state, up in Virginia, and was newly married at the time. And so my wife and I had, you know, some very intentional conversations about kind of our, you know, my career, our relationship, kind of what we wanted for, you know, our future. And you know, really, there was a natural pull for us to come back to Atlanta. Like my wife is also from Atlanta. We went to high school together, but really, I had a passion for this business and a career in this industry, and so we had a very intentional, you know, conversation that said we were going to prioritize career opportunity over geography, and so rather than follow kind of the natural progression to kind of come home to Atlanta, we made the decision that home was going to be where we were, and that ultimately, you know, if I look back on the kind of 20 plus years of my real estate career, you know, took me to Washington D.C. for several years. We then actually moved back home to Atlanta, and that's where I had the good fortune of meeting Dexter and Audria and Devin, and developed friendships there. But then ultimately, kind of my path led me to New York, which I thought I would never move to New York, but kind of, you know, early 30s with a newborn child, we packed up and moved to New York in 2 weeks, and followed opportunity with Morgan Stanley in New York. And again, that ultimately led me back to an opportunity with Cousins Properties back home in Atlanta. But I say all that we had that intentional conversation that we were gonna kind of prioritize opportunity over geography and see where that took us, and just kind of make our home wherever that opportunity took us. And we feel fortunate and blessed to be back home, but we had a lot of great experiences across a lot of different cities and made a lot of great friends, and it's been a lot of, you know, the joy is in the journey. So
yeah. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so I hear a couple things there. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I hear, you know, you fell in love with real estate. So it's like you get the bug, right? And people fall in love with it because it's tangible, as you described. There's like a certain breed of people that, you know, value relationships, that are entrepreneurially minded. But then I hear that, you know, you were ambitious and you made a decision jointly in your relationship where, you know, it ended up making a certain amount of sacrifice, right? When you're talking about, you know, your child just being born and moving and those kinds of things. But it was intentional. You made it with intentionality, and so this is what, you know, at this point in my life, where I'm going to go, and then the roads ultimately did lead you back to it, man. So it's really cool.
yeah.
All right, Dexter, I'll go to you next. Same type of question on, you know, you've had a few different careers here, it seems.
So the biggest inflection point was really the seeds being planted for me to actually pursue commercial real estate. I was intrigued by commercial real estate really back in my even back in my high school days. I got involved with a real estate partnership, which is a whole separate story by itself. So I had kind of got a little bit of intrigued by it in high school, but really what sparked even more was getting involved with a program called Inroads. Inroads had just started in Atlanta back in 1980. And they had a variety of different professions in the business world that you can perhaps intern with companies. So I had interviews with several companies, and had gotten a couple of offers, but for some reason that commercial real estate, that equitable real estate was offering me at the time as an internship working in the area of property management. It's what laid the foundation for me just to really get excited about the industry. I was not necessarily fully convinced that I wanted to major in real estate in my undergraduate program at Georgia State University, but I am going back and getting my master's after having worked for a few years. I went back and got my master's in real estate from Georgia State. But the internship is what really sparked me. It was really my inflection point because I was just fascinated by the many variables that go into really just managing a commercial asset. My first property was Northweek Office Park, which is still over on Northside Parkway, very fine piece of real estate that's still timeless and still shows very well. So from spending time with engineers, spending time in the office itself, just understand just the basic fundamental components of what does it take for commercial investment to be successful. I had that exposure as an intern, which was really, so look, I like this industry. I want to pursue it. So when I finished school at Georgia State, at the time, Equitable Real Estate was kind enough to extend me an offer to come and join them in their asset management division. And so again, having worked on the property management side and understanding the basic fundamentals, it was able to actually catapult me into the area of asset management pretty easily, so to speak. Again, I guess another inflection point, day one, I had a chance to work with some of our large pension fund clients. I had a chance to work with the California Public Employees Retirement System. As a youngster in the business, we bought Highwoods Office Center up in Raleigh. And again, working with, just seeing how the industry has evolved over time. Back then, we actually had to send lease agreements, and Colin, you appreciate this. We had to send lease agreements out to California that were like 150 square feet of space up in Raleigh because we didn't have delegated authority to sign leases back when the major pension funds started. Major pension funds started investing in leases. They didn't give them as much authority, but again, back to what Audra said a minute ago about developing relationships. It was Todd Davis, who was my first point of contact at CalPERS. On this call, he would tell you, look, Dexter wouldn't be where he's at in his career were it not for me, call him up, asking him questions about 150 square foot lease in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Just again, I think that was important. I mean, I think, looking back and getting exposure to someone like a Michael Destro, who's focused on details. We had Sahi Same Equitable relationship that started, and the Japanese are very meticulous in getting involved in the details of the numbers. And so, he taught me, look, you got to focus on the details. So I think, the people you surround yourself with really have a lot to do with shaping your character and your resolve and your ability to actually get the work done. So again, I can keep talking about different inflection points, but those are two important ones. And then I'm going to pivot to Morgan Stanley. So when Morgan Stanley decided they wanted to move away from managing large separate account clients, I basically unwound that part of the business within Morgan Stanley and worked myself out of a role in Morgan Stanley. And so that was another major inflection point, trying to decide, look, what's my next chapter in the commercial real estate space, or what's my next chapter in life? Because I was actually looking at some opportunities outside of commercial real estate. But look, at the end of the day, Dallas and I knew of each other, but we really know each other. So we saw each other at Atlanta History Center back in February of 2010. I said, look, I've left Morgan Stanley. What are you up to? I said, look, I'm trying to figure out what my next chapter is going to be. He said, look, with a 100 degree of certainty, he said, look, you need to become a business partner and move from the, representing owners of real estate to representing occupiers of space. So that conversation, the seed was planted back in February of 2010. And then Georgia State was trying to recruit Dallas to serve on the foundation board. And so we scheduled that meeting with the lady who was running the foundation at the time, Nancy Peterman. And so, after that meeting was over, Dallas said, look, I'm serious about us becoming business partners. And so it was probably in April that year is when we really started, some serious conversations about, forging a partnership together. Dallas had lost a lot of money, working with Brian Jordan, doing a development deal in south of Atlanta. So we were both kind of in a rebuilding stage at that point in time when we got together back in 2010. Worked on a couple of transactions that summer to see we're compatible, and he and Leonte and I worked on 2 deals together that summer. So look, it feels pretty good. So let's take a ride and see where it goes. And so it's a lot that happened over the last 11 years, but we can get into the rest of that story later. But those are probably a couple of 2 examples of inflection points.
Yeah, thanks, Dexter. The themes that stand out to me from what you said is internships, exposure, and opportunity. So, people don't even know, like, oh, you got a college degree in real estate. Like, what the heck does that mean? None of you are selling houses in the way that most people would think of it. And our undergraduate students will ask me, well, how do I get into, we've got more jobs than students normally. How do I get one of those jobs? And it's bridging that gap between something on your diploma and some tangible experience. And then you go, oh, now I get it. Now I get what this opportunity is. And the students that get internships and take advantage of those opportunities, I see such a really high success rate for them placing and being in the field in 5 years. The exposure to, the institutional investors and just even knowing that side of the business, and then taking advantage of the opportunity when, you were in a situation where life was kind of pushing you to find a new opportunity, I think. So, but yeah, thanks for that. Devin, how about you? Some big inflection
Sure.
points in your career?
Similar to Dexter, an internship was pivotal for me. I was at University of Georgia. I took an internship at UPS, working in their plan sponsor, which was an alternative investments. So my undergrad degree in finance had me working in this group where I was focused on real estate. And in the course of the summer working there as an intern, someone left, and they asked if I could fill in the gap and take a year off school effectively before graduation to stay on, with the agreement that there would be a job when I graduated. And so I agreed to do that. And it was a great experience. And I learned a ton. I ended up going back to University of Georgia to finish, and the market changed. And that job was no longer available when I graduated. However, Lend-Lease was the advisor to UPS at the time. And so they made the connection with me to get the interview at Lend-Lease, which is where I first met Dexter and Audria, and then was working there in more of a accounting / reporting role, and moved into asset management about 2 years later, which was around the same time that Morgan Stanley purchased Lend-Lease, which was also the same time that I went back to Georgia State for grad school. And that's when I really started honing in on asset management skills and learning the business of real estate. And probably with the exception of Dexter's predecessor roles for predecessor companies, Morgan Stanley, I think I was the longest to stay there. I just left a couple of years ago. I ended up spending almost 19 years at Morgan Stanley / Lend-Lease. I left in late 2019, and this might make the other panelists giggle because they know the gentleman I'm speaking of, but really the biggest inflection was my boss of 17 years decided to retire. And I had worked for him my entire career. I had known, he was a tough person to work for, and but he taught me a lot, and we respected each other, and we actually got along very well. And when he decided to leave, I kind of thought, what's next for me? I think there was an opportunity where I wasn't feeling challenged anymore. And at that exact moment, Brookfield was looking for someone to run US operations. Unlike Colin, my husband and I made the decision we were going to stay in Atlanta. We have 3 young children. Both of our families are here, and we did not want to leave. And so that was always something that we were considering. Was there an opportunity for me to continue to grow within real estate and stay in Atlanta? So getting that call from Brookfield, who said they really viewed Atlanta as the logistics headquarters for the globe, that was a game changer. And so I decided to take that leap of faith and started in late 19 running US operations. About 10 months ago, I shifted over to the global portfolio management role. Again, my boss left, and they tapped me and asked if I would be interested. I had a lot of concerns having the young family and a global role and what that would entail. But we make it work. And I think, you have to consider your family options and your obligations to that, but also, how can you continue to grow and pursue career growth through, opportunities that you're given. So.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I hear your themes of just continued growth, right? And what, if it's a lesson for people who have employees, if you're not challenging them and you're not engaging them, they could start looking around. You got to keep them, part of the process. And then I also hear you moving from maybe one type of a role, which was maybe more accounting based, and towards asset management, which kind of engages a very different, probably part of your brain and stimulation. So, I've always been a big proponent of know thyself. If a student's like, well, which job should I take? I'm like, I don't know. You, right? Like, so what do you? And the four of you work at very different types of firms. I think Audrey described TriStar as maybe a niche or somewhat boutique in some ways, and the commercial brokerage side that Devin Smith is on, and really is focusing just very specifically on tenant representation. I think Colin, some people would consider it an institutional investor type, a real estate investment trust, and so there's a culture that comes with that. Although I do understand that Cousins is likely differentiated from that umbrella term. And then Devin, you can tell me what category you would put Brookfield in. But maybe I'll start with Colin. Just kind of what kind of personal characteristics would make someone a good fit at a type of firm such as Cousins?
Well, I think again, my sense is probably the characteristics, particularly folks coming out of school and trying to get in the business. And I think they're probably pretty similar across all different types of firms. And obviously the four of us are all later in our careers in different different types of organizations, but a lot of similarities. But we look for hardworking, ambitious, and I'd say curious oriented people that are kind of interested in what not only what we're doing, but why we're doing it. And we believe that those type of folks that ask questions bring us additional perspective and over time have kind of great opportunity to grow. And so it's really that kind of curiosity that we focus on, and we're looking for people that view their work at Cousins Properties as more than a job. It's a passion, and so that's something as we spend time with young folks, we try our best to understand if that curiosity and desire to learn and grow is if we look hard to find that. But one thing I would just add is, as you're coming out of school, I meet young folks all the time coming out of school. I used to do the same when I was coming out of school and trying to learn and find opportunity. And I always kind of try to share with folks, look for opportunities of a really strong organization that has a strong culture, that has senior folks there that are trying to help young people grow, and that are active in the business doing real transactions. And I think if you get kind of really good experience, you could start at a publicly traded real estate developer on the brokerage side, or large asset manager at bank. I personally don't think it matters that much. I think what matters more is, are you in a really good organization where you're going to build a really strong foundation? If you build that foundation, you can move from one side of the business to the other. But without that foundation, you'll quickly run into roadblocks along the way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting answer that I think a lot of people would find counterintuitive. They would probably expect you to say, to sound more like a bank, right, or a financial institution, and say, oh yeah, you're going to be, he said institutional, you're going to be a cog in the wheel. If you like a steady paycheck and you want to hang on to that government job, then here you go. And you're basically saying things like personal growth and desire for personal discovery, that intellectual curiosity, and taking that next generation of analysts, or whatever role they start on, and letting them see a future there. And I think that's powerful, and that kind of eclipses organizational size or where the organization is facing. So yeah, it's a good answer. Devin, how about you? Who do you think might be a good fit? What kind of personality traits for, I think you talked about a pivot towards specifically the asset management side of the business. So to those that might want to get into asset management or at Brookfield.
Yeah, just back to the comment on Brookfield. The thing I found fascinating is I think anyone that knows Brookfield and thinks of a company that's got 650 billion in assets would be super uber institutional, right? And coming from Morgan Stanley, that was my assumption. What I found is Brookfield buys a lot of companies and then expects people to run it the most efficient for that company. It's very decentralized and it's very entrepreneurial within each sector. So within the logistics sector, we are a very culture-oriented group. We are very young. We are trying to grow a business. We don't have a lot of policies and procedures, which I think people find a lot of surprising, especially those of us that came from Morgan Stanley. A bank has a lot of policies and procedures. What we try to do is make people very efficient. And to Colin's point, like that entrepreneurial spirit, that wanting, the desire to learn. I tell anyone who's mentoring someone in our group, like, bring them with you. If you're going to a conference, have them with you, make introductions, have them at dinner. It's actually was one of my biggest concerns during COVID was that people were not getting that exposure sitting at home. And people might enjoy sitting at home and working from home, but if you aren't getting that on-the-job training of how business works and how people interact, it could really harm people, I think, in their future careers. So we really try to keep the newer people engaged, listen to their ideas, sharing what we know and how we learned it. And I just think the person that's going to enter into an institution that likes those things should really love to learn. And it's an interview question I always ask. How do you like to learn? Do you like to read? Do you like to watch things? I find it fascinating how people prefer learning and people know how they like to learn. And so that's good to know as a mentor and as a boss.
When people say, I just don't like to learn.
Probably not a good
fit. All right. Thank you, Devin. Audria, yeah, to you, the kind of personal traits that might make somebody, personal characteristics that might make somebody a good fit at TriStar on the side of the business that you see yourself on.
I would say being flexible and being willing to do different things. So over the course of my time here, I've done asset management and investor relations, different things like that. And then in running the nonprofits, they have both changed a lot over the past few years. One in particular, Star C, when the pandemic hit, we started an eviction relief fund, and we thought that was just going to be like a $50,000 GoFundMe. And we ended up raising over $12 million, and really taking on a regional role of leadership with that. And you talk about starting something from the ground up and building the plane while you were flying it, working with government entities, people in crisis, and all those sorts of things. So I would just say being flexible, knowing how to communicate, having good communication skills is very important. Being able to ask questions, get feedback, give feedback, all those sorts of things are very important. And then continuing to learn and build upon your skills where they are, so that if you're at a certain point this year, next year, you're even better than you were. So those were the types of things that I would say. And then too, when I first came on, they were saying, oh, okay, Audria, well, we know you wear a lot of hats, but you'll just be the executive director of these organizations for a year, and then we'll do some shifts. Well, here it is, like 4 years later, and I'm still in the executive director role. The organizations are growing a lot. So I would just say, again, that's just another way of being flexible. With a small organization, you really have to have an entrepreneurial standpoint. And a lot of times you have to know how to do what makes sense for your business. And again, that's a part of flexibility as well.
Thanks, Audria. So Dexter, the commercial brokerage, the compensation structure even is totally different, right, than all these other sides of the business. And there's probably a certain type of personality that fits well and ends up, a few years later, you see them be very successful, and some that, you could talk to someone today and say, John, you should not be a commercial broker, right? And it's so what are those traits that can make somebody a good fit for your type of work?
So there are a lot of common themes that have already been covered that I think are transferable into a lot of sectors of the industry, a lot of sectors of this this thing called work, regardless of whether or not you're working for yourself as an entrepreneur or working for a company. There's some innate attributes I think that we have to have. But John, you mentioned about one. I did go from at least a certainty of compensation on a salary basis for, every 2 weeks I got a base pay plus performance bonuses, to now the structure is an ownership structure where we get paid based upon the volume of transactions we get completed. So our goal is to really have a balance of institutional sort of corporate relationships that can give us sort of recurring pipeline of activity, and also pursuing some single one-off transactions. So our model is set up so that we really have only one technical employee, and everybody else on our team are viewed as independent contractors. So there's a lot more risk involved with our structure, that you're really building a business within the organization, because everybody needs to go out and try and help develop new relationships with new prospective clients who could provide services for. So Maze, is another example. Again, he's new in the business, but he's going out, building relationships with potential clients to do business with. So regardless of whether or not you're just getting started or you've been around the block for a few times, all of us are responsible for trying to make sure we cultivate those relationships. So that's a key part of what we do. We don't necessarily have widgets that we're selling widgets, where we know that we got contracts in place that are going to give us X amount of business on a recurring basis. All of our compensation is tied to successfully servicing our clients and getting transactions closed. So let me also add, and this is again back to me, common themes that we need to have as professionals, is the ability to understand, again, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are the things I need to work on to improve my overall ability to work with people. Do I have some personality, soft skills that need to be addressed that's going to help propel me more in the business? Do people enjoy being around you? We've got a client in town right now that's looking at some potential space, at least in Atlanta. And one of the things we talked about last night at dinner was, part of our business can be viewed as a commodity. How do we distinguish ourselves from our competitors? How do we build meaningful, authentic relationships that we're not just trying to check the box and say, we've got this transaction closed, thanks, go on to the next one, but how do we really get our clients to be endeared to our team, that they just enjoy being around us? And so I think some of those soft skills that we may not necessarily learn, in the formal classroom, you learn over time. Just by virtue of Devin and Audrey and Colin, I've been on the call together. I think we have some, even though we're not physically connected with each other, we built meaningful relationships back when the times we were together. And so, when I told Devin that Colin was going to be on the line, she didn't say, well, I can't be on this panel because Colin is on the panel. Because the relationship was there.
Opposite. He said, I can't wait to see Colin.
So, but again, how do we develop good, authentic relationships that last for a lifetime? And I think that I think those are the soft skills I think we need to start really thinking about, as well as the hard technical skills that's going to cause us to be successful in whatever pastures we decide to work in.
Thanks. So what's interesting is each of you, I think started off somewhat granular, doing, kind of the menial tasks or something like that. If you start a restaurant, you've got to, wash the windows and clean the floors, or, biotech, you've got this lab researcher. And then at some point, you've all kind of now stepped into like a leadership role, in different ways, but leadership, which is, and take the biotech example, it turns out a lot of times that those lab researchers that were the best researchers are terrible at being the managers of other researchers. They don't know how to get these people to do what they want them to do. And what was that transition like? And what did you learn along the way in terms of, and how do you like it, being in the leadership side now? I assume that you do because you're all leaders, but maybe I'll start with Audrey as your transition to leadership from, being more boots on the ground.
Well, I think that it just starts as soon as you engage with people, because when the people on this call, when they start out in their career, they'll be working in teams. And a huge part of leadership is knowing how to work with others. If you can't work with other people, if you can't communicate effectively, even peer to peer, if you can't collaborate, then you really can't lead. So I think that leadership just builds on that. And in terms of a transition to leadership, I think that it's just key to understand, again, how to communicate with people, how to encourage others, and then how to maintain a bigger picture, because so many times it's easy for people to get focused on just what's right in front of them, what task they're working on right now, what project. But as a leader, you have to have other things in mind as well that you can break down and communicate to them, and really pull people up out of the weeds. But again, I think it starts with a foundation of being able to collaborate effectively, communicate, and then know how to maintain your eyes on a bigger picture beyond some of the very detailed things that people may be focused on.
See the forest from the trees, so to speak.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Audrey. Dexter, how about you?
So, John, I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second here. What's
It's okay. So like becoming a leader or stepping into more of a leadership role, if you can kind of go back to the point in your career, at one point you were boots on the ground, and now, you know, you have people looking to you for guidance.
So John, thanks, appreciate it. So on the topic of leadership, I think everybody has to understand, regardless of whether or not you have a title of a quote unquote leader, you should view yourself as I'm going to own my future. I'm going to take ownership of it. Nobody's going to outwork me at whatever I do. You know, how to have the drive and zeal and the grit and grind to get up and go get it. And so I think everybody's got to be their own leader and trying to give their best effort. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you know, leadership is about taking accountability and responsibility for what you're doing, and not waiting on somebody to kind of tell you what to do next. But just as Colin said earlier, I mean, how can I be creative and think about, you know, what's going on? Can I offer some solutions to this particular role that I'm asked to do? Can I offer some other creative ideas in terms of how to best approach the situation? So I don't think you need to wait till some magical moment where you're becoming, you know, a quote unquote, you know, have the title of a leader. The question is, how do you view yourself as owning whatever you're doing and doing it your best, whatever it might be, every day, and trying to stay, as we have a little saying around our office, how do I stay green enough to keep growing every day and not necessarily thinking I've already arrived and I'm just going to keep coasting. So the minute you start feeling like you're not coasting, we're just going through, I think you need to go find something else to do, because you're not really, you know, to me, really truly getting the best out of yourself if you're just going through to check the box. So I think the leader, the term leader needs to be personalized, and you take leadership of your sphere, whatever that might be. So I wouldn't necessarily, again, wait until you get to become this or that, but start owning it, whatever you're doing right now.
Yeah. So act like a leader today. It doesn't matter what your title is, and if you play that hand, or you play the hand that way, then you're likely to become and be acknowledged as a leader soon thereafter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Devin, what do you have to add to that? Or characteristics that make a great leader? I don't know.
I agree with what Dexter said. I think one of the biggest surprises for me in leadership, well, it was two things. It was kind of, I got into this business because I love real estate. And I find now I do less of real estate than I ever have in my entire career. But what that's given me is how much joy I get out of, you know, sharing my prior experiences or deals I've done and how that could help someone else. And then in watching people advance through their careers. And so the second thing is, I think everyone assumes, to Dexter's point, when you are a leader, that you make all the calls, you have all the time in the world, everyone else does things for you. I find I have less of time that's mine now, because I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure that the people, I'm more of a support system for the people in the organization than before. And so more of my time needs to go to making sure that they have that support. And one thing I've discovered is blocking out my calendar for an hour a day, just to make sure I can really focus on the things that I need to focus on and have the time, because I do want to make sure that everyone's getting the time they need from me to share those experiences, to help them solve problems, to make sure I'm connecting people who might be able to help each other. It's different than I think a lot of people assume that a leadership role is.
Thanks, Devin. And then, Colin, I think your version of leadership that you've been, or taken on is, that you're responsible for a lot, everything, right? All aspects of the organization, a lot of people, a lot of processes. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on, evolving into, your style of leadership that you are now.
Yeah, it's again, it's something that I try to be intentional about. And so I grew up in the real estate business. Well, one point I actually just want to make quickly as you look at the 4 panelists, just for the folks and the students on this call, is none of us were on a linear path to our current role. And I think, I always share with folks, like, it's important to have a plan and be intentional and thoughtful about your future, but write it down in pencil, not pen, because the world is fluid and it's bound to change. And so again, just be kind of mindful that likely whatever you start doing right out of school, it's unlikely you're going to be on a linear 20 or 25 path to whatever it is that you're thinking about doing. So learn along the way, and is I think Audrey said it well, be flexible. So for me, I grew up in the real estate business as a kind of an investments person, doing transactions and deals, buying and selling different types of real estate, and that brought me a ton of enjoyment and fun, and I've loved every single second about it. I realized when I was asked, I guess, to run Cousins in, almost almost, I guess I'm on my 4th year. I mean, to be clear, I had never really run or managed a large organization. In some respects, I had absolutely no idea kind of what I was doing. And so I sat down at the time. I remember talking to my wife about it and saying, I don't really know what the role is. Nobody's ever told me what the job responsibilities are to be a CEO of a publicly traded company. And so I just kind of sketched out and wrote out what I thought kind of my job description should be. And ultimately, what I focused on was, it was going to be a big transition for me. I was no longer the person doing the deals, but my job really, as I think about it, is to set the strategy of the company, big picture. What do we want to be doing? Go build the right team kind of at the company that can go execute that plan. And then, really my biggest job is to communicate kind of that strategy to our team, to our shareholders, to our board, to the community. So every person who goes and looks and spends 5 minutes at Cousins knows exactly what we're going to do, kind of why we're going to do it, and who we are. But I found something very interesting as I transitioned into my role. Is somebody pulled me aside and they said, you've been appointed CEO of Cousins by the board of directors, but you have not been elected as a leader yet. And that was going to take some time. And so you can be appointed in whatever title, but it really is over time, your company, your firm, they will elect you as their leader. I think if you over time show empathy and humility, and in some cases kind of listen more than you talk. And so those are some of the guiding characteristics as I think about, as I come to work every day. It's really listening to the team, and again, showing empathy, showing humility, trying to put myself in their shoes, and then focus on kind of those, as I said, the job of setting strategy, building a team, and just communicate, and then communicate some more.
Yeah, again, thanks, Colin. Again, you're having a little bit of a counterintuitive, or what might sound like a counterintuitive answer, right? Somebody might expect a CEO to say, well, I go in there and I just tell everybody follow me, and I tell you to do this and you do that. And you're saying, no, I listen. And I gain the respect, and I care. And when I have the respect, then I can actually move some things around and move us towards the compass setting that we're supposed to be at.
Yeah, I think that's right. When you I think it was like the second day that I had kind of gotten into my role. I guess my wife was reading the Wall Street Journal, and she sent me some article, and it said the average tenure of a CEO at a publicly traded company is like 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And I think, a big part of that is those CEOs never transitioned into being a leader, and the company didn't follow. And if the company doesn't follow, the results don't come along with it, and that's going to be, that'll be a pretty short, pretty short experience. And so,
Right.
Yeah, I think you've got to, you got to focus on the relationships, think about it long term, and again, I think kind of empathy and humility and communication are crucial for anybody that aspires to be a leader. And again, to be clear, I know I have certain friends that love kind of the transactions and the deals, and really never aspire to be, in the CEO role or whatever,
Right.
whatever role.
Right.
And that's great. Again, I think it comes back to being intentional and being focused on what truly brings you enjoyment. And oftentimes, again, kind of fellow panelists will all, I think, have all experienced this at an organization like Morgan Stanley, where we all kind of grew up. Oftentimes the best transactions people are put into leadership roles, and oftentimes those really good transactions people are some of the worst leaders, because it's really not what they want to do. And so I from time to time, candidly, I'll look around and say, I kind of miss the real estate. I miss the deals. But my job is to let my team, who's now responsible for that, do that. And so there are trade-offs. They're definitely trade-offs. And again, I think it's important to really think about kind of what you're doing and why, and focus on not what you think people expect you to do, but focus on what you think is kind of best for your personal enjoyment, and that's where you're going to do your best work. Right.
Devin, it looked like you had a.
I was just going to say, I think that's a really good point. The person who left Brookfield and I moved into his role, he couldn't find a path for himself back to what he loved doing, which was development. And so it ultimately, to your point earlier, John, about challenging people and making sure that they continue to grow. Sometimes it's the leader that feels like they don't have a path to control their own destiny, to do what they love too. And so, Colin's point was great. Like, you had some of the best deal people don't want to be in that leadership role. If that's not something you aspire to, then understand that as well, and make sure that you're doing something you love. It's the old saying, if you love what you do, it's not work. And I definitely feel that way. I think probably most of you guys up here do too.
Yeah, if you're a deal junkie, have an honest relationship with yourself, and just go to where the deals are. I was talking to maybe a week or so ago to someone who's on the senior leadership of one of the national home builders in town, and I was like, so like, what do you do? And she's like, honestly, I don't even know what the hell I do. Like, I show up and like people reach out to me, but like all the stuff that they taught me in college, like the textbooks and the skill, like the spreadsheet, like I don't even know if I could do it anymore. It's been like 10 years since I actually dug in and did something specifically myself.
We give an Excel test, and I joke that they better not ever give me that Excel test, because I'll fail it now. I aced it 15 years ago today now.
Yeah, it's this idea that you evolve, and as you do, you have fluid learning and crystallized learning that are growing together. And then at some point in your career or age, the fluid learning where you're putting in all the work and doing all the granular stuff, you're kind of like, okay, I got enough of that. And then you have this crystallized learning that doesn't shrink, and it just accumulates. It's your wisdom that's over your life. And then all of a sudden that becomes the most valuable thing. And so here we are, at a university, teaching students all this textbook stuff, right? Here you gotta know how to punch this into a financial calculator, or you have to know this term. And, each of you are basically practicing things that day in and day out have maybe transcended a lot of that. And there's lessons that get you there. So anyway, I'm just, thinking of, not stuff that we could teach them in a textbook or that they could read in a textbook, but some kind of lessons that you accumulated over your career that you would never find, in a textbook that kind of helped you get along that path. So maybe I'll start with Dexter on this one. Lessons that you would never find in a textbook.
Lessons never found in a textbook. That's a good one. I think really some of it gets back to just the soft skills, just trying to understand the importance of relationships, and just trying to build those meaningful relationships really, on a continuous basis, make sure they're credible and authentic. I don't recall having a lot of that necessarily taught in the textbook, so that'd be probably one thing that I'd probably highlight. I mean, time marches on, and I think that just understanding that you don't want to be wasteful of time, but as Colin said a little while ago, just being very intentional about what you're trying to get done, and understand, and just owning, trying to own your development, taking personal ownership and personal responsibility. I mean, those are some things that come to mind that I don't necessarily think are quote unquote taught in the textbook, John. But you hopefully will have mentors that are coaching you along the way and trying to encourage you to become your best self, and to keep trying to move forward and have again some of those personal sort of characteristics that will help catapult your destiny.
Thanks, Dexter. Maybe next I'll go to Devin. Yeah, lessons you'd never learn in a textbook.
One of the things I love to say, and I actually get this from another former Morgan Stanley colleague, John Shozer, attitude is greater than aptitude. Like, if you have a good attitude and you want to learn and you come to work every day eager, it doesn't matter what you know today. You're teachable and you can learn, and having a good attitude will make people want to work with you, and you'll form relationships. And just, I think keeping that in mind, you don't have to know everything today. You'll learn it along the way as long as you're open to learning.
Yeah. Audra, how about you?
I would say when you're looking at people in the industry or talking to people, that sort of thing, don't put them on such a pedestal or think that they're so far ahead of you or they're so different than you or anything like that. I think that sometimes for myself, when I've heard people talk about leadership, sometimes it can seem like something foreign or it's always somebody else. But just know that for the bulk of life, leadership is mostly just showing up. And if you're showing up somewhere and willing to participate, that's going to set you apart from most people. I would say for people coming out of school, really think about like how much money you want to make. And you might have to move from job to job. I was at Morgan Stanley 12 years. If I had to go back, I might not have stayed there that long. So I don't know if you'll read in the book that you might need to job hop a little bit. That's probably not such a huge issue for this generation, but I'm telling you, think about how much money you make and you want to make and keep moving forward to that. And I guess just at a point where as you just continue to learn, just don't judge yourself so harshly. Just whatever licks you get in life, learn your lessons and keep moving. And that's what I would say.
Audrey, after almost 19 years at Morgan Stanley, a recruiter told me I was unhireable.
What? Whatever. Now I will disagree on
It's
that.
wrong, but
For you, yeah, I hope you hung up on them.
Yeah, I think I like the point about kind of decide how much money you want to make. I mean, I think that money is one way to define it. I also hear the themes on like nonlinear paths, but what I've seen of our GSU grads is, students who just had this tenacity and picked a destination that they wanted to be at. And, I've seen things, whatever you want to call it, the universe conspire to like clear a path for them. And they just, yes, you have to pay some sort of price and make sacrifices and give things up. There's nothing that you just get everything and don't have to give up any sacrifice. But I've seen basically the world be the oyster for a GSU grad. So, we were talking about leadership. I remember when I was at a different university and they were starting an entrepreneurship program, and this guy was professor, he was like, yeah, they asked me to teach a leadership class, and like, I keep reading these books, to me, that's what this is all about. It's like, you can't read a book on leadership and then you become a good leader. It's a lot about this human experience, these interactions and learning and growing and those kinds of things. But anyway, I think Colin and I neglected to get you the same question. So lessons that you would never learn in a textbook that were kind of instrumental for your career.
Well, you just maybe touched on one point just now. To me, that's always been helpful, and I share it with folks all the time, that you'll get to certain kind of points, and again, we talk about being intentional and pick and pass and all that kind of good stuff, which oftentimes maybe things are a little bit more ambiguous and gray in your life to say, well, I'm going to go be intentional, and this is exactly what I want to do. I mean, sometimes that's hard, right? Because you might not know. And I've been at certain points in my career, and I've had friends who've come to me at different points in their career. Maybe they have a decision to make. Do I want to switch jobs, or am I happy doing what I'm doing? And it's all very confusing. And so how do I figure that out? How do I find some intentionality to what I want to do? And so for me, one trick that I've used in the past, and I've shared with some folks, is always assume that there's more work to do. But if you stepped back and said, if somebody who's 5 or 10 years ahead of me, or even 20 years ahead of me in my career, if I could fast forward, whose job would I want to have?
Yeah.
And then kind of work backwards and say, okay, so what path do I want to put myself on? And so that has been helpful, for me, right? I remember being up in New York, and there was a decision: was I going to move home to Atlanta? Was I going to continue into New York? And I was in the private equity side of the business as we were moving to the public side of the business. And I stepped back, and honestly, at the time, I asked myself, I had no idea whether I'd ever end up being the CEO of Cousins Properties, but I asked myself at the time, and the folks on this call probably remember, I said, would I rather, in 10 years, and that was probably a little ambitious, but in 10 years, would I rather have Larry Gellerstedt's job, who was the current CEO of Cousins, or would I rather have Michael Franco's job, who was running Morgan Stanley's real estate business, nationally out of New York? And so that's kind of how I thought about it. And I share that with people all the time. When you don't have the clarity, it's okay to not have the clarity, but just kind of look around the business and say, who's somebody that's 10 years ahead of me, and would I like to have that job? And then you can work towards it. And again, as I said, don't forget along the way that the world's fluid and it might change, and be willing to take your eraser out and kind of rewrite that plan. But it gives you some target, and again, I think it allows you to find some kind of intentionality and some goals. And so that's, to me, has always been an easy way of like, whose job would I want? And go pursue that.
Yeah. So it's very close to something that I say. I mean, so we can, we know where we're from. We can tell our stories with near certainty, like, here's where I'm from, here's what I did yesterday, all these things, but where are you going? And I think that it's challenging for students to identify that. Some of the jobs, even in the companies, are changing very quickly. The main constant that we have is change here in this life and in this career and in this profession in the next decade. And but nothing says more about where you're going than who you pick as your mentors, right? Somebody comes in front of you and says something, you're like, they have it, and it could be their job that you envy, but or desire, and it could also be this characteristic that they have that you don't know what it is. They carry themselves, they have this wisdom or smoothness or whatever, and then you have an obligation to try to pursue that, build a relationship, make them your mentor, and that really is going to tell you. So in very much the same way that Colin's describing, identifying somebody like Larry and saying, hey, I want to be in that seat. It's a very similar process, I think, also in terms of shaping who you are and moving towards a company setting. Yeah. So the world has changed a lot since you guys entered the profession at very different, varying points in time. And, here we are in an interesting point in the cycles. Some things are looking up and some things are looking sideways. And so if you're a rookie getting into the business now, here's a college graduate or somebody who's graduating in May, maybe has a couple opportunities, or considering, you can talk property types, you can talk roles, start off as an analyst or whatever, but what would your advice be for somebody who's graduating in a couple months and wants to get their first job and wants to end up kind of following your lead? So maybe I'll start with
John, I'm gonna pause you before you call on one of us. I'm gonna ask Maze to jump in since he's a recent graduate.
Oh, yeah.
And then we can kind of circle back to the panel and put Maze on the spot for that question.
Right, but there's an asterisk that this is very self-serving because Maze wouldn't work for you. But,
I think it's a great idea.
but yeah, that's perfect. Maze.
Hey, Maze.
So just for context, I graduated from Georgia State May 2020, and I was actually in John Wiley's class fall 2018. And just a little bit about my transition. I was playing football at Georgia State, and it was the first year playing in our new stadium. And as Dexter mentioned before, Dallas was on the board for Georgia State to help kind of facilitate that transaction. And so when I was in John Wiley's class, I was interning with Carter & Associates, the company that's doing all of the development around Summerhill, and they're doing some work in West Atlanta. And Carter, I was interning at Carter, and I remember the first day in John Wiley's class, he mentioned how we had a tour to an office building. Ironically enough, it was 101 Marietta Street, the office for T. Dallas Smith and Company. And that first day after class, I came up to John Wiley and I said, hey, I intern at Carter. You know, they're doing a lot of development around Georgia State. I think it'll be good for the class to tour this development. And he told me that, you know, the semester was kind of filled up, but he paired me with Area GSU, Alumni Real Estate Association. And the president of Area GSU was Cedric Matheny, who's a vice president and principal at T. Dallas Smith and Company. And me, I always wanted to be in commercial real estate brokerage. Never knew any commercial real estate brokers. And so me and Cedric, we talked. I did the tour for Summerhill and the Met. And I also told John that same day, you know, I want to get involved in the Real Estate Society because I had a lot of free time. I wasn't playing football then. And so funny enough, the vice president of Real Estate Society was in our real estate development class. And so I did the tour for Real Estate Society and Area GSU, right? And that day pretty much spring-forwarded my career because I met Cedric, who's a commercial real estate broker in Atlanta. He went to Georgia State. And so after that, once my internship at Carter ended, I started interning with T. Dallas Smith and Company, February 2019. So my advice would be to you all is, you know, take control of risk. You got to be a risk taker. You got to be able to put yourself out there. If Colin mentioned earlier, you know, join an organization. And if there's not opportunities there for you, create opportunities. There are opportunities that you can create. As you see, the dots were there. I just had to pretty much connect them, right? And so once I started interning at T. Dallas Smith and Company, they kind of already knew what kind of person I was. I'm the type of person who wants to add value. I say that to Dexter all the time. John Wiley seen it the first day of class, right? I'm always looking at ways to implement myself and find new ways to connect with new people. So that would be my advice to the undergrad group on the call today.
Thanks, Maze, and it's good to see you, by the way.
Likewise.
Hi, everyone. To kind of piggyback off of Maze, I'm also, not so recent, but I graduated in 2013. I too was a real estate grad. I took John Wiley's class. And
you have to say your name though, for everybody.
While at Georgia State University, I was part of the real estate group, which is now called Real Estate Society. Real Estate Society, yeah. It was a different name back then. But my advice to any recent grad, Georgia State University kind of ultimately propelled my career within real estate. My first assignment in my real estate principal class was to interview someone within the industry. At the time, my professor was Alan Ziobrowski, who was kind enough to tell me about this building, 101 Marietta. And the owner at the time was Scott Jackson, who was also in his class a couple of years prior. I thought to myself, wow, I'd love to own a building like this one day. So to your point, Colin, I took that and went up, came over here and met Scott Jackson, had a pleasant interview with him. And afterwards, he told me about T. Dallas Smith and the company in the building as well. So right after leaving his office, I immediately went to T. Smith and Company to introduce myself to them. And there was great synergy there. Met Dallas and Dexter for the first time. And 2 days later, after doing some research on them, I called back Dallas and I asked him to give me if I could work for him. And he was like, well, we don't really have any, we're not doing any internships right now. I was like, I work for you for free. I just want to learn about the business. Just give me a chance. I just want to soak in whatever I can. So to Maze's point, you have to create your opportunities. Dallas at the time didn't think I was pretty serious about the ask, but I kept coming around every single day to try to see how I could add value to his team. And fast forward a couple of years later, I left Dallas and came back, but the biggest thing that I could say that I did to propel my career was networking, and just really create your own opportunities, figure out which path you want to go down. And even if there isn't an opportunity, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to work for free ultimately, because today it's been very, very rewarding.
Well, it's great to see both of your faces after, these years. And, when I'm looking at you both on the same screen and talking, the only things that I can think of or unsaid, you said both really valuable things, but I think of you both were kind of unafraid to identify, I love real estate. I'm a real estate person. I'm gonna be real estate. So that's one thing that I don't hear everybody who's like a college sophomore or something like that saying. They're like, I think real estate's interesting. I want to own a bunch of properties. I also want to do finance, accounting, secure, and I have this. I'm a social media influencer, so I've got all these things going on, and it's like, that's not focus, right? That's a lot of things that you're talking about there, and if you can narrow it down. And so you both, I think, were pretty unafraid and saying, no, I'm real estate. That was one thing. And then the other thing is just there was a constant push. There was a tenacity of like, all right, what else can I do that will make me more real estate? What's the next step? What else could I be doing? And some of that was relationships, going to events, getting involved, connecting to people. And that was a force. So there was no question in my mind after having each of you in my class that these are the traits of people that are going to be in the profession in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So really great to see you.
I think it's back to exposure.
Thanks for letting us hijack for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So John, I think a lot of it is exposure. We really, some people think the commercial real estate is kind of a secret society where you just don't really know anybody to tap into. So I think that Atlanta is obviously a major real estate market, and it's really becoming a real estate market is getting worldwide recognition right now, and so it's a big industry. And so the question is, how do I tap into it? There's a lot of different ways to tap into it. It's not just one straight path forward. So I think I want to pass it on to obviously Colin and Devin and Audrey to jump in, but it's just so many different ways you can get into business. I think you really have to think about, where do I want to start my chapter, but don't let that be my only chapter that I want to write. Do I want to write multiple chapters, and what might be a good way of starting that role? And people may not necessarily major in real estate, but gravitate to real estate and having pursued other majors. So it's such a wide open industry. But I'm gonna pause because Maze and Rita took up quite a bit of time already talking about T. Smith and Company, so I'm not gonna talk about that anymore. I'm gonna pause and pass on to Devin and Audrey and Colin.
Well, it's find an entry point, and the truth is that T. Smith and Company has always been totally open to and said, hey, you have any young, students that are ambitious and interested in commercial brokerage in particular. We've got, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the largest Black-owned commercial brokerage firm in the nation, right here, a few blocks away from you. And, look at your students are incredibly diverse. We'd love to give them opportunities, have them knock on our door. We'll give them stuff to do. And you're not the only ones, but you guys have been very, very loyal and very, but I hear you saying, find an entry point. It doesn't have to be this one or that one. There's going to be no perfect one. You sort of get in and then fit in next, So Devin, advice for the rookie.
Yeah, I think along those same lines is don't be too particular about what it is that you do. and take all those different experiences, learn from them, and then use that to figure out what it is you want to do. You know, I was a generalist for 19 years of my career. And when I decided to move into purely doing warehouse and logistics, I had one of the people that interviewed me for the job was like, "Are you sure you just want to do warehouses?" And I said, "Yeah, because I've done a lot of things and this is what I really like. So for the second chapter of my career, this is where I want to spend my time." But you don't know that when you're fresh out of college. And so take advantage of those opportunities that are given to you, learn from them, spend time doing something maybe you don't like. Maybe you'll find out you do like it. Or if you think you don't like it, maybe you do like it. But take advantage of any opportunity you're given and try new things.
Yeah, sometimes those things that you feel a little agitation or discomfort, sometimes that's growth, and sometimes it's you seeing that things could be better or could be improved, and you're learning about yourself, and you know, when you get the opportunity to do it differently, you might very well do it differently. Those are great points.
Absolutely.
Let's see, next, Colin. Advice for the rookie: if you were starting in the profession today and knowing, you know, you've seen this thing evolve.
Yeah, I think it's important as you come out of school, again, the humility of probably recognizing that you don't know what you don't know. And again, the best way to kind of get through that stage and get more understanding is to get experience and exposure, as Dexter said. And so I oftentimes say a very common meeting I have with folks kind of coming out of school is I want to be a real estate developer because it sounds kind of, you know, really cool. And so oftentimes there are not necessarily always immediately a lot of really good real estate opportunities right out of school. There's some, but I always share with folks, rather than chasing what they perceive to be a real estate development opportunity at a company that's actually really not that active developing anything, they're not going to get the experience that they had hoped. And so if you want to be a real estate developer, I would guide people, if you don't find that right opportunity where you're going to be active and busy, you're much better off working at a brokerage firm like T. Smith, who's involved in a ton of deals, and some of those are development oriented deals, or working in asset management at a large investment manager that is active owning a bunch of real estate, because you are going to run across just the problems and the situations and the things that are harder than you're going to find them in a textbook. So I just get that experience, get that exposure. I honestly believe right out of school, long term, if you wanted to be in the logistics business and you started off in a multifamily company or an office company and you got really great experience, and I think Devin would probably agree, over time you can figure out how to leverage those same analytical skills, those same relationship skills, and you could always become an industrial developer. But without that foundation, as I said at the very onset, you're going to ultimately run into roadblocks. You've got to have the foundation, and the time to build it is right, as you get out of school.
Excellent. Thank you, Colin. Audrey, advice for the rookie?
Well, I think that you're getting an excellent education with Georgia State. I got an MBA with a concentration in real estate from Georgia State. So you'll be well prepared along those lines from an educational perspective. And of course, Georgia State has an excellent reputation. So that will be a great benefit to you. If you're getting started in your career, I would just say, be willing to learn, talk to people, be willing to try different things. It doesn't have to be one path, be willing to move around. And I would say, know that work is just one aspect of your life. You can build up your leadership skills. You can build up your communication skills, even outside of work, by becoming involved in community organizations, becoming involved in your alumni association with Georgia State on the real estate side or just in the general side. And even in that way, you can make connections that can benefit you in your career. So I would say, be willing to try different things. in your career, and then work on yourself, on your other skills, even outside of the professional arena, because it all comes together because you are one whole person.
Thanks, Audrey.
Sure.
So we're getting, I guess, relatively thin on time, but hopefully you can see the complete circle from like where they've ended up at to maybe giving you advice from where you could start. We probably have time for a couple questions. I see some in the chat. So does somebody, Kobe, did you have one that you wanted to ask? If you want to unmute, you can.
Yeah. Thank you, John, for telling me to ask my question. My question was basically just has anybody on the panel ever had any experience with wholesaling real estate, or would you guys know anyone that has had success in the industry of wholesaling real estate?
So by wholesaling, you mean
by
buying it from?
By wholesaling, I just mean like getting a property under contract and basically selling it for higher than what you got it for, and just keeping the difference. If that makes sense, like an assignment contract.
Yeah, flipping contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can tell a story. My uncle back in the 70s did this. He had one where he did 7 escrow. So and it was a big piece of land in coastal California. They wanted to make whatever, some 7 figures every time it turned. And that price of land just went way up. So what that tells you is like when the market gets absolutely stupid crazy, then you'll see these double escrow, triple escrow situations. They're outliers. They're not, and the panelists can disagree with me on this as well and provide their input. But my opinion is that it sounds like a really sexy thing to like not actually have to do anything and just get involved in the contract and then flip to somebody else, and you have no capital at risk, no ownership moment, except for maybe just a few minutes at a closing table. That's it. But realistically, they're kind of black swan event. They're very unusual, and there's not anybody that I'm aware of, or many people that I'm aware of, that make much money consistently doing that. Normally you're doing it because you're already doing some land development plays, and somebody else wants to come along and pay you a stupid high price. You're like, all right, I'll wholesale. But I could be wrong. Devin, maybe? Do you have
No, it's not something we typically do. We're income buyers for one of our funds. We're an opportunistic buyer and another fund, and that's where we have done something similar. Actually, on the other side was we had a forward contract on a deal. We were going to lease it up and take on the leasing risk, not the development risk. And in the meantime, while we were under contract, a user came along and wanted to buy the property from us instead of leasing. And as we were reviewing this, because it looks incredible, right? It's an infinite IRR deal. You never come out of pocket. You sell it at the closing table. It looks brilliant. But what we like to say is, IRR doesn't buy breakfast. You can, yes, take away that money, but if our goal is to have return and track record for our investors, and in the meantime, we watched rental rates continue to go up, it just didn't make a ton of sense for the tax burden we were going to have to take on. That's another consideration based on your tax status. We're a REIT, so we have certain rules that we have to abide by. And so we decided it's not the business that we're in. We are investment buyers. We like to add value and create value for our investors.
Yeah, thanks.
I would just add that's if you just kind of step back and try to think about that business simplistically, in certain environments that can do very well, in certain environments it doesn't. I mean, it's based purely on momentum. You could think about that akin to if you look back at last year in the public equity markets and kind of the GameStop craze, that was all built upon that there was going to be somebody that was always willing to the next day pay you a little bit more than what you paid yesterday. And again, there are certain environments, and it certainly has been over the however many years, an environment where the market has just kind of gone up. But that is a business. Again, it is certain times I think you can do very well, but when the tide goes out and the market kind of goes down, as Devin said, without any income, you can kind of find yourself naked. And so I just think that it's a highly risky business. And I would probably have a little bit of caution if you look at kind of what's happening in the public home builders, right? Kind of the public market proxy. You've seen the prices of their stocks drop, 10, 15, 20% in the last 6 months. So I think that's, maybe a little bit of a signal of what could happen. And again, so I'd be careful. And if you did it, I wouldn't use any leverage, because you don't want to find yourself kind of stuck, right? If there isn't a buyer to flip it to, and you got to close and you got to own it, are you comfortable with that? And if you are, then maybe think about it. But make sure you're comfortable owning it if you can't flip it.
Thanks,
John, there's a question that popped up about
I saw that one.
Women.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that, if you look at the conventional world of like, what is the ownership of commercial real estate look like? It's, very high percentage white males. And if you look at our student body, it's not. It's a very big, mismatch there. And so how do you, plug in and how do we place and promote and, help find success for, the women and minorities that are coming through our programs? And so, here on this panel, we have, Dexter, I think you've been involved with Empire Board of Realtors, Devin with, I believe with Crew, I think is one that you could bring up. So maybe I'll start with Dexter. But the idea is the networking, and there's also networking that, that is, sort of playing the hand that you're dealt, right? It creates challenges and uphill battles, and we talk about some of that, but then also to turn those into opportunities that I've seen some of you do. So Dexter, you want to go for that?
So just the being intentional about, again, being involved in organizations. You mentioned Empire Board of Realtors, they have a commercial council, but a lot of the large organizations in Atlanta, from Crew to NAIOP to ULI to the Atlanta Commercial Board of Realtors, a lot of these large organizations have have passages, opportunities for students to get involved and start shadowing people early on in the business. So I would just ask you that if you are interested in getting attached to some organizations, I just mentioned a handful. I'm just saying, again, it's Crew. I think Devin and Audrey, you both have been involved in Crew over time. There's ULI, there's NAIOP. There are a lot of industry organizations that, again, are opening up the doors for students. Atlanta Commercial Board of Realtors open up the doors for students to get involved with, with the organizations and start trying to shadow different professionals in the business. So that would be my short answer and recommendation for your students to look out beyond just the walls of Georgia State. Mazia and Rita mentioned some Georgia State opportunities as well to get involved and getting exposure to business now is important.
Yeah, I would mention the NAIOP diversity internship. Brookfield participates in that, which is local in Georgia. But also Project Destined is another internship that Brookfield participates in, and they do virtual internships as well and mentoring. So I think those are two really good opportunities to get involved. I know the NAIOP diversity internship specifically targets GSU students as well.
Cool. Adria?
Well, I think we've covered it as far as the organizations go that are suggested over there. At one point, there was an undergraduate GSU club. So while you're in school, definitely get involved in that. I would highly suggest getting involved in Toastmasters. I don't know if there is a Toastmasters organization at Georgia State, but please do that. Even wherever you are, it just works on your communication skills. It's not just about public speaking, it's also about engaging with people on a smaller scale, one-on-one, working on your conversation skills, their leadership tracks. They have a lot of different ways you can take that, and you can get so much out of being in such a positive environment. So I would really add Toastmasters on there. We're at the kind of, I guess this was supposed to go to 1:30. I would just say, for me, somebody asked what were the challenges that had been endured. I mean, there are challenges. I would say that for me, even when I started in undergrad all the way up till now, there were so many times when I was the only woman in the room. I might have been the only Black person in the room. So then of course I was the only Black woman in the room. And sometimes that was, it just made me feel really awkward. I'm an introvert anyway, even though I can be very sociable and engaging and friendly, but I can tend to be on the quieter side. So, you know, you can be in environments where you need to still be able to speak up. When I was at Morgan Stanley, speak up, Audrey, speak up, be more vocal, all this kind of thing. And it would make me feel nervous because again, I would be younger than a lot of the people in the room, the only Black person, the only woman in a room full of men, whatever. But I would just say, continue to work on your communication skills, continue to work on your leadership skills, continue to work on yourself. You know, most of the time, most of the people that you work with, you might not be bosom buddies, but they're going to be friendly. You're in a you won't really be in a hostile environment. If you find yourself in a toxic environment and you feel like you can't speak up for whatever reason or participate in conversations, that's not the place for you anyway. But I would just encourage people, if you don't let the idea that you may be a minority because of your gender or your race or whatever, your cultural background, don't really let that hold you back. If you're in a space, you deserve to be there. No matter what myths you may hear, most people aren't really given a lot in the world today. If you know, you might be given a chance, but you have to earn it to hold on to it. And certainly if you want to advance. So I would say just go forth with confidence, continue to work on yourself as a leader. If you feel like things aren't moving at the rate that you want to do, wherever you are, again, as I said, develop your leadership outside of work and then be willing to make some changes about where you are.
That's excellent, Audrey. So here's how I recommend we proceed. We're at time, we're just over, and I want to be respectful. So first, I'm going to thank all of our panelists, and then I'm going to stick around for a few minutes to try to see if we get any other questions answered. Anybody who wants to can do that. But first, yeah, let me thank all of our panelists very much for just all of your wisdom and experience that you just shared with us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you. And
Sure.
it was good to see you guys. It's just
Good to see you too.
virtual hugs, virtual
Yeah,
hugs.
likewise, Andrea. Devin.
Well, thank you.
I do have
Good
to drop. I
seeing-
apologize. I have a 1:30 I need to run to.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.